everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, happy May Day. How are you doing today?
Happy May Day to you too, John. I am doing well. Man, May is probably my favorite month because things really transition out of winter and into the planting season.
Yes.
And so I love this month. Yeah, how's your yard doing?
It's good. And, right now in May Day, we're getting our first kind of May, not quite showers, but sprinkles. That's really nice. Yeah, and the yard, we talked about this, but just within the last 10 days, just how much green has come up. How many things you're seeing it in the lawns. You're starting to see it. We did some cleaning of the beds and starting to see some of the perennials come up there. I got an interesting story about this, though.
Yeah, what's that?
So last year, I told you we had our street dug up in front, so they had to replace some water main stuff. So they also dug up our boulevards, and so they put new dirt in. And then they did, what are they called? A hydro seed, I believe.
Right. Yeah. We're kind of the seeding with that greenish mulch that goes over it. Yeah.
And they just spray
hydro seed.
They spray it over and it lasts over winter, obviously. So we're starting to see that pop up. But then the other day, Sam said, did you see that we have a hosta on the north side of the sidewalk? Oh. So
That is emerging through the hydromulch?
That is emerging, yes.
So a previous and an older hosta?
Well, that's the thing. So the previous owner of the house, she was tired of her husband keep hitting the water main shutoff valve with the lawnmower. So she planted hostas around the valve so that he wouldn't mow over it. It worked great. As they were doing I saw that the construction was coming closer and they were going to get ready to start ripping up the yard. I went out and I tried to move as many of the hostas as I could, dug them up and replanted them in another place. And I thought, well, whatever's left, I'll just let them go.
Sure.
It was hot. It was a hot day and I was tired. They must have picked up some of that soil and just moved it over, because where these was on the south side of the sidewalk.
Right.
This is about 15 feet away. We're seeing
so it's coming up at a different
totally
distance
different space,
from where it
totally
once
different
was.
Coordinates.
Wow.
Yes, and it's starting to come up.
The persistence of a plant.
Yeah. So I guess I'm wondering, how big are hosta? What are they? Because they're not bulbs. They're not.
Yeah, they're
really.
Kind of a thickened root.
Yeah.
But I wonder, then there must have been a little crown or enough of a part that, like you say, got picked up when they were moving the soil around and putting it back down, that it carried along that hosta root or part of it with it. And wow, that's pretty amazing. So, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to leave it out there? Because that'll be in lawn area.
Yeah, part of me wants to leave it out there just because. But
sure.
Like I've said too, I think I want to.
Made it this far.
I want to expand that our sidewalk area out a little bit. So I may pull it up and I may put it someplace else. But
yeah, I think it would. It would be a shame not to let that hosta. It has persisted through all this.
Exactly.
It would be a shame not to give it a prime spot now.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it'd be a shame to just mow over it now that it's in the grass. So yeah.
What are you seeing popping up in your yard?
Oh, golly, the iris each day are getting bigger, the daylilies. And of course, many of the perennials, it depends on their location. Anything on the south side of the house is well advanced. Things out farther in the flower beds aren't as advanced, but each day it seems like they're growing. And perennials like this cool weather. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's been a nice spring for perennials. It hasn't been over hot. They don't need 90 degrees in April and May. And so this gradual warm up, I'm noticing that people, my plants are people.
They are. We talk to them.
I notice the plants are enjoying this. They're growing at a nice rate. They aren't being pushed by hot weather. And so I have a good feeling about this spring. Much of the area got some well-needed moisture. And so, the peonies are coming up nicely. Even some of those that aren't in the warmest spots, I'm noticing they kind of come up with a reddish look to them on peonies. They're poking through. Daylilies are well advanced. Our fleece flower seems to be one of the last things that emerged.
Ours
That's
is not
coming yet, but I did get it all cleaned up. I've got the perennial beds all cleaned up. I got everything kind of taken out, raked out. But some of the things I just crumble up if they're crispy
Yep.
and they don't have disease, I just crumble those up. I didn't originate that idea. I was watching a video once, I think that originated in Minnesota, and they said that as long as some of these perennial, the old parts, as long as they aren't diseased and are brittle, why not just crumble them up and it kind of makes a mulch? And so that's what I've been doing.
I suppose
of course, the mushy stuff like old iris leaves and some of that I didn't get cut back last fall. This spring, they're just kind of limp and awful. And I try to get any of that away. Also, there were a couple of peonies that I didn't get cut back. And of course, those always have foliage type diseases, it seems, mildew and different things. And so I always clear cut and remove those.
I suppose, one thing
are growing.
About the mulch or, cutting up that, the dried stuff, you could probably, I suppose, just think about that. This is more steps than maybe you'd need, but we don't have very big, very wide, garden beds. We've got a small lot, but like, I would think like you could rake them up into next to the bedded area and like on the lawn side, and then just go over it with a lawnmower and shoot them back in. That way you don't have to bend over and crumple them all up.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
One of the favorite things that I'm seeing coming up in my yard is the bleeding hearts. Those are coming up really nice. And that's a fun thing to see because it's really one of the first, well, not the first, but it's an early flower.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of nice to see that.
Ours aren't coming up yet. Ours are fairly young. That also brings up the point about established perennials will usually come up more rapidly, just because they're more established, than a younger one that hasn't been in place. Our bleeding hearts were only in place for about a year, and so they aren't coming up yet. I hope the rabbits didn't get them before I noticed them. But so old established perennials just usually come forth a little quicker too.
Well, today we're going to talk about not only the plants that are in our garden, but the plants that we're going to put in our garden. We're going to talk about, we're both really excited to get into the garden centers.
Because I always need more plants. It seems I always need some more. So I'm looking forward to visiting garden centers.
And so we're going to talk about that. But first, you have a question from a listener.
Yes, I do. Dave wrote in and sent a photo. And Dave writes, if you look at the photo, you'll see rabbits have damaged my shrubs. Are they going to make it? And what can I do to prevent this in the future? And so
that's right down at the base.
Yeah, Dave didn't mention what the shrubs were. They look like probably a good 5-6 feet tall, maybe
They're
5
pretty
feet.
well established.
And when I enlarged the photo, they are burning bush. I can see the squarish stems of burning bush, quite diagnostic as to the type. And right down at the base where the stems of those, kind of the main trunk of the burning bush enters the soil, you can see the white wood. Critters have gnawed away the outer bark, and of course the cambium layer of a tree shrub is right below that outer bark. And so when something chews away the outer bark down into the white wood, they've usually removed the cambium layer. That's kind of the life support system that conducts stuff up and down, and the growth tissue. And so once that it's gnawed into that all the way around, and these have been totally stripped all the way around, that looks like probably from the soil on up to, I'm guessing, maybe 8 inches on every one. I'm seeing probably a row of 3 or 4 of these. They look like they had been very healthy. And so are they going to make it? Now, there's no magic elixir that we can apply to these to heal it. So once that damage is done, no pruning paints or sealers should be applied. That's been shown to adversely affect the healing process. So I always suggest in a case like this, just wait and see what happens. It all depends on how deeply, and I've been referring to critters. It's probably rabbits that did this, but it could also be voles, the field mice. They could have been working under snow, even though we didn't have much snow. They could have been working underneath, and voles will strip that bark and chew into also down kind of at or above soil level. And so whatever it was, a person almost has to wait. And burning bush they're like rabbit candy. There's something in that bark that they just love. They'll come from miles around for a good euonymus burning bush. And so I also suggested people just wait and see. I've seen them recover from that kind of amazingly, but I've also seen many die. But there's no rush to do anything since there's no medicine we can give them that will make it all better again or reverse the damage. So now the problem is if it had just been the above ground branches that were affected, we could just cut it off down below the point of damage. But the point of damage is at the bottom of these shrubs. Yeah. And so cutting them back probably isn't going to work. So if during the course of May, when everything else is leafing out, we'll see if these leaf out. Well, that'll be good. You hold your breath. If they don't leaf out, then I would go and just cut them off almost at soil line and see if anything would come from the root. If they would regrow from the root, if the creatures left enough growing points down there. Chances are not good for this. When they damage them to that extent, they might not make it. But wait and see is the thing to do. You'll know during the month of May. That will tell whether it leaves out or doesn't.
We have a burning bush in the front of our house, and so it's not in the fenced-in part of our yard. And we had rabbit damage a couple of years ago, and it did bounce back, but it wasn't at the base of that like it is in the photos that you just showed me. Mm-hmm. Really ground level where they stripped around. So we were able to kind of cut off some of the limbs that were maybe damaged, but it did bounce back. They can do that. Sure. I would say, going forward, if it does bounce back, make sure you put up a chicken wire fence. Yes. And probably to 3 feet at least or something like that. Do it up to some height and give it some space around that come early fall, really, just to make sure you get it in there.
Good advice, John, because if you don't protect a burning bush, you're really risking it.
Yeah.
You're really taking a big chance on it.
And especially, if you know that you have rabbits in your yard and clearly there's something there. I mean, voles are going to probably get to something. A little chicken wire fence is not going to stop a vole. But.
Yeah, really not. Yep, unless you put like hardware cloth kind of close to that. But it was probably likely. I would guess the rabbits, and maybe he saw the rabbits working on it too.
Maybe there's some other things to sprinkle around it during the year if it does grow back a little bit. I'm not sure.
Yeah, liquid fence and plant skid.
Yep.
Liquid fence, plant skid, and Repellix are the three that have the best research and science behind them.
Now, are marigolds, do they repel rabbits or deer or both? Or neither?
Well, how about neither? It's interesting. Of course, that's kind of an old thing as well, just, plant marigolds around. But rabbits have actually eaten my marigolds. And so, maybe for some people they've worked, others it doesn't. They haven't had any, marigolds have had no effect for me. Yeah, they don't keep anything out of my yard. Well, I like marigolds. I plant lots of them.
They're beautiful. They're super colorful and very nice and really kind of tidy.
Yeah, they are. Nice.
So we're going to talk about going to get new plants, whether you want just to get new plants for your garden, whether you have to replace something that was damaged or died.
Dave might need some new burning bushes.
Yeah, or something else. He can. Exactly. This is an opportunity, Dave, to think about. I love burning bush, so if you want to do that again, if you decide that you need to do that, but you could also put in something else there. So let's talk about this a little bit. Like, when we're going into the store. Well, first of all, Don, I'm going to ask you what's on your shopping list this year.
Oh boy, I need another Trader mulberry.
Okay,
because I planted the original one maybe in the spot. I didn't realize that they get as large as they do. You see, I've made every mistake there is. So anyway, I need to buy another Trader mulberry because the one that is growing it's too old to dig up. Okay, perennials. I need more peonies. I want some more lilies, and so those are on the list. I'd like another plum tree. I've got one plum tree, actually 2 plum trees for pollination, but I'd like a third one because homegrown plums are delicious. And so that's at the start of my list.
So as somebody who now is going to be going out shopping, and as somebody who used to run a garden center, own and run a garden center, you are a great person to give us this guide to how we should approach going shopping for plants.
Well, it's been fun to be at both sides of the cash register at the garden center. So yeah, Mary and I had our garden center for almost 25 years, and we really enjoyed it. And now we enjoy shopping.
Yeah,
too. And so how about you on your shopping list? Anything you've got?
We're going to replace a hydrangea. And so we're going to kind of move the area for that a little bit. We're going to be looking for a hydrangea. There'll be a couple of other small things that we're going to put in. And I always say that it's going to be just small things. And it's never just that. It's always so much more.
Well, yeah, and of course you mentioned the list.
Yes.
And yes, it's great to go with your list. But I've got to admit that when I get to the garden center, I need one of those.
And
I don't have that one.
Impulse buying is very real at a garden center.
And I'm as guilty as anyone. And because, all of a sudden it's, I need, that phlox. I don't have that shade of tall garden phlox. I need one of those. And so anyway, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And as I mentioned to many people as we're talking garden centers, especially people that are maybe new to gardening, that there are kind of two types of garden centers. There's the national chains, that sell lumber and home appliances and everything else, and also have a garden center. Okay, that's one type.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, the selection of products that they sell may be made by national, managers that are stocking that store. Okay, so that's one type of garden center. Another type that I want to make sure that people new to gardening experience, and that are the locally owned garden centers. Many of them have grown the plants, many or most of them grow the plants themselves, the bedding plants and things, and they specially select the trees and shrubs so that they're well adapted for the community. And oftentimes they will know their customers. If you're repeat customers, they'll get to know you. And if you need something a little special, they'll do it. They can most of them will custom plant up planters for you. And so it's a totally different experience at locally owned than a national chain.
And that's one locally owned. The key word there is owned. And local owned. You can sometimes even talk to the person who owns that property.
Oh, definitely.
You will never be able. You can talk to a manager at the big box stores, and they will be a lot of help. But if you talk to somebody who owns the garden center, they will also maybe be able to tell you, well, what will be coming in, what will be some things to look out for.
And typically they are the locally owned garden centers typically tend to be more trained in gardening knowledge. Because that's their thing, that's their livelihood.
Right.
They don't sell 2x4s, so they tend to know their product and specialize on what it is that the product that they're selling. So I think it's important to make sure that a person doesn't just experience the national chains and think that that's what a garden center is. I like going into a greenhouse in which it's maybe a little tighter and you can smell the humidity and the aroma of the soil.
Yep.
There's maybe potting benches in the corner there that they've been working, potting stuff up and transplanting. And so I like that feeling. I like that feeling too. And so do you do any preparation before you go to garden center? I mean, other than thinking about what you want?
Well, that's the big thing, is to try to at least approach it with a list in mind and not stray too far from there. But we tend to take my car, which is an older car, which is a little bit more beat up too. And so I'm not afraid of making a mess in that car. So that's one of the things that it's not necessarily prep work, but that's one of the considerations we do.
Sure. And the reason that I bring this up is because when we had the garden center, oftentimes we'd help people out with their purchases, and we'd be carrying trays of flats of flowers out for them, and they'd open their trunk and oops, my gosh, it's all full. And
yes.
So then they'd need to clean it out. And of course, it does help if a person cleans out your trunk beforehand, before you go, and maybe line it with plastic. And of course, some of us still have last year's little remnant of potting soil and leaves down in the bottom of the van. But if to make ease of cleanup more efficient, lining with plastic or putting boxes or something. If you're going to buy some potted perennials, maybe some boxes in which to set them down in so that the dirt kind of stays.
And also, that's a good thing to say about that too, is that we've had plants tip over on the drive home.
Oh, sure.
And that makes a mess. And you're also never sure if it's a taller plant, that if it tips, if the stems are going to be stressed, bending, or even breaking.
Or if it loses a lot of the potting mix and the roots are exposed.
So having a box that's maybe try to have a box that's maybe the height of the average container.
Good point.
So maybe 4 or 6 inches tall. So if it tips, it will just kind of maybe just shift against that rather than totally flopping over.
That's a good point. Yeah, to support the pods. The other thing, too, I used to get kind of a kick out of it. We would carry things out for people, and they'd open the trunk, and they'd sometimes be a little bit embarrassed because they'd been to another garden center, and their trunk had other plants, and it's all fine.
Right.
I don't think any garden center thinks that no garden center thinks that you only have to buy things from them. The more plants, the merrier. We just all love that people buy and do plants. And so you don't have to be embarrassed if you've been to another place as well.
Because different garden centers will carry different lines
exactly.
too. And so if you want a particular brand and a particular type, if you've got something very particular in mind, then you sometimes have to go looking for it. And it's not maybe at the first place you go.
Because places have their specialty.
Yep.
They have their specialty. So you don't necessarily have to run home and unload your trunk and then go to the next garden centers. We're all in this together.
Yeah. But no, it is a good note to line. We've got station wagons, so we could put something in the back. But if you have a car with a back seat, you want something to put down there that's going to save the back seat. If you've got a car with nice leather interior, you certainly want to be aware that if you're putting something in there that might be a recently watered plant, that there may be a little bit of mud that comes with it.
True.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about things to do before we go shopping for plants.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back and we're talking about getting excited. We're going to go to the garden center. We're going to go shopping for plants. These are the things that you need to do. Right before our last break, we talked about you want to make sure that you've got your whatever vehicle you're taking, that you've got space in there. You've got it kind of cleaned out, not necessarily clean, but cleaned out as far as space goes. So you've got enough room to bring in your plants. Maybe bring a box with you or something like that, so that to support those plants. So when you're driving home, if you take a corner, they don't tip over, and also that you line the base of wherever you're putting it in, so you don't get water or mud dripping on your plants, whether it be with cardboard or you can use towels or plastic. What else should we be doing?
Well, I think it's important to measure the containers. Many of us like growing flowers in containers. And when you get to the garden center, it really helps if you have measured those pots ahead of time, because I always think when I get to the garden center, I'm going to remember what size diameter those pots were, and I don't. So then I'm wondering, okay, well, let's see, how many plants actually should go in that? If I beforehand take a tape measure, measure the diameter of the different pots that I've got, and write that down. And I like to take the tape measure along with me, so that then when I'm trying to decide how many go in, pull out the tape measure, and if it's an 18-inch diameter pot, then I can kind of visualize better what 18 inches are and say, oh, okay, I need maybe, they're going to be, pretty big plants that I'm putting in. They'll grow to a pretty big size. Maybe I only need 3 plants in there. So knowing the diameter of those pots is key. Otherwise, we tend to overbuy.
Yep.
And crowd them in too much. And also, for any landscaping that you want to do, measure the area.
Yep.
For example, if it's an area you're going to put shrubs in, measure that area so that you have an idea then of the size of plants that you put in, how many you're going to need. So I think it's really important to measure and write those down. And, sometimes when you go to a garden center, especially the local owned, if you've got some specific questions, it's nice to be able to ask the people there. And Monday through Thursday is the best day if you'd like some individual help. Those are the days that tend to be a little less busy. Friday, Saturday, Sunday are unquestionably the busiest days of the garden center, and maybe the help might not be able to always give you individual attention. If you have a detailed question, there's usually enough staff there to help you see where the tomatoes are and where the peppers are, and a quick question about things. But if you have a detailed question about what can I plant here and there and what would you suggest, then I'd go during the week, Monday through Thursday.
If you're going to need that extra attention, if you're going to need a little extra help, that's a good plan. And also we should say too that Mother's Day is coming up. So especially the day, Mother's Day itself, the Saturday before, maybe even the Friday before, they will
That
be
is
busy.
a busy weekend. That was typically the busiest weekend of our whole year in the garden center, was the Mother's Day weekend.
So if you don't, you can go out and do it then, especially if you want to get some things for the mother in your life, but also maybe the Monday after would be pretty nice too.
Exactly. And it was fun to see sometimes on that day, Mother's Day, people would bring in mom and have them select a hanging basket or another plant. And so, it's a fun weekend. And it's interesting. It's also fun to go to a new garden center that you've never been to. The garden centers that you go to all the time, you know the procedure, you know where the boxes are, you know where everything's at, and so you go about your business. But have you ever, John, gone to a brand new garden center and you kind of go in and, at first you feel kind of a little, unsure? And so when you go to, especially to a new garden center, I like to kind of just put your radar out a little bit and see, okay, where are the annual flowers? Where are the perennial flowers? Where are the vegetable plants? Where are the shade plants? Where are the sun plants? How do they kind of have that divided up? And then also scope out what do they want you to put your plants in? Do they have boxes stacked up and you're supposed to grab a box and put them in there? Or do they want you to grab trays? Or like if there's only one tomato pack left in a tray, am I supposed to kind of take that tray, set that plant out, and then assemble my stuff in the trays? Usually it's quite evident what they want you to do, but look for that. And do they have carts that they available for your use?
Well, and one of the things that you're talking about there about the kind of know the layout or take a minute to figure out the layout. We're not saying like you need to know this because you need to zip through and we're not looking for the most efficient thing.
Right.
But because like me, at least if you are like me, you can spend a lot of time in one area and then forget that you're supposed to look in the shade plants, or you're supposed to look in the perennials or things like that. So just kind of take a minute to recognize where things are, where things will be. And also too, like if you're going to get annuals, but then you want to get a couple shrubs, you're going to want to probably maybe pick up those shrubs at the end so you don't have to carry the bigger things around whole time.
Yeah, very good point. And also check where the prices are. Pricing has gotten easier, with kind of automated, barcodes and different things. Pricing has gotten easier, especially for the national chains. Each item probably will have a price on. Some of the locally owned garden centers that are actually growing more of their own material, there may not be a price on every pot. So take a look to see, do they have the prices up on a chart somewhere? That the 4-inch pots are a certain price, et cetera. Cell packs a certain price. So kind of check out the pricing structure.
And something like that too, that especially for annuals, they will be maybe, but I think like once you get out and you start looking at shrubs or trees, certainly prices can vary both depending on the size and then the variety of it too.
Yeah, definitely. And the nice thing is once you've scoped out a new garden center, well, then the next time it's easier. You kind of know where everything is. And, when in Rome, do like the Romans do, you kind of know then, oh, good. I kind of know what the procedure is at this garden center. And so that's fun. Well, how about we get right into looking, or what do you look for in some of the best plants? When you're shopping for plants, how do we pick out good ones?
How often did people come up to you and just say, "Can you just pick me out a good one? Yes. Can you pick me out a winner?"
Very often. That was very common with geraniums. Geraniums are sold usually in a 4.5-inch pot, either round or square, and they're usually in full bloom. Geraniums are a plant that is really well groomed and developed. They're disbudded early so that all the strength goes into that plant. They're pinched and groomed in the greenhouses so that they're just almost picture perfect. And so oftentimes in the garden center, people would say, gosh, they all look good, but can you pick me out a dozen good ones? Because I don't know what to choose. So we would. And what we would look for is geranium plants. And this holds true for kind of lots of these types of plants too. But we would look for a geranium plant that was well branched at the base, right above soil line, more than just one stalk coming up, but multi-stalked, because then that plant will grow into a larger, fuller geranium. Okay, so we would look for well branched and a stocky plant, stocky, sturdy, that wasn't too stretched. If a geranium was kind of too stretched or leggy, the best thing it could do would probably be to pinch it back. And so we had always pre-pinched geraniums so that hopefully none of ours were leggy. Okay, so a good husky one. Then also we would usually ask, okay, what are you going to use this for? Do you need it to be blooming for a special date or something? So we would look at the buds, the flower buds that were unopened. For example, if they say, well, I'm buying these geraniums for Memorial Day. I want them to be blooming at the cemetery on Memorial Day. So then we would look at the buds. If the buds were tight and not showing any color, maybe they wouldn't be open in time for Memorial Day. But if they were showing a little hint of color, then the timing might be right. So if you've got a special event, look for how advanced they are. Make sure it's going to be open, the flower buds, open for that date that you're looking. And so it was fun to assemble a dozen geraniums for people. So if we talk about other annual type of flowers, maybe annuals are sold in packs. 4 packs is kind of the customary now. Maybe it's impatiens, that you're buying for a window box or flower bed, a pack of impatiens. What a person would look for is, first of all, dark green leaves. And this holds true with all the annual bedding plants. Dark green leaves, stocky plants, that aren't stretched and leggy, starting to blossom, not so far bloomed that it already looked like they've spent a lot of their energy. But again, look for dark green leaves, solid husky plants. The tallest isn't always the best. Maybe the shortest and stockiest will be better branched. And, we've talked before about when I get annual plants home and they're blooming, I cut off all the flower buds so that all that strength
Petunias
can go in.
yeah.
And petunias especially. Geraniums are an exception. They've already been pre-pinched and flower buds removed. Excuse me. Flower buds removed at the appropriate time, so you don't need to take off the flower buds or blossoms on geraniums. Other things to look for in types of plants at the garden center, on vegetable plants.
Yeah.
Tomato plants are a popular one to buy, and make sure that the leaves, again, are dark green. Tomato plants, if they're getting stressed for fertilizer, tend to get a little yellowish, pale green, and so opt for those that are nicely, richly green. That means the nutrition has been good on those. And make sure they aren't too tall. You can plant tomato plants deeply, but it's best if they haven't been in those pots or packs too long and gotten too old. So sometimes a young, vigorous tomato plant might be better than one that's too old, even though you can plant it deeper. Make sure that when you're buying like cauliflower or broccoli plants, make sure they aren't too old. And when say too old, a plant that gets too old in the pack, broccoli or cauliflower, will start to, it's called buttoning. It forms a little button of the fruit when it's a young plant in the pack. So, for example, a cauliflower will have a little cauliflower up at the top of that fairly little plant, and that's not good. It means that plant is already getting old in that pack. So for cauliflower and broccoli, make sure that the leaves are nice and fresh and no sign of any little button of a cauliflower or broccoli starting to form in those. And for cabbage, lots of nice green leaves is good on those. Perennials. I like to look for perennials that have as many branches coming from ground level. We'll talk a little bit later in the podcast about how to save money, and you can save money on perennials if you look for one that has multiple stalks or branches coming out of the ground, the pot that it's in, instead of just simply one. And trees and shrubs, make sure that, again, that they have good, healthy leaves that aren't wind burnt. You know, the edge of the leaves might be crisp or something if they've been wind burnt or something like that. So just kind of a good, sometimes that's where a visual cue, one that looks good and healthy is probably the better. Look for branches that are nicely branched, not broken. Not twigs that are broken or mishandled in shipping.
Along with that, we've talked before about one of the things to look out for, especially in larger potted plants or shrubs, trees, things like that, is a root ball that's if the roots are growing all around. Is it okay to try to ease out the can you ease that out in the store a little bit to try to pull it up out of the pot a little bit just to see if the roots are totally encompassed? Because it's happened to me a couple of times buying, especially from a big box store, buying something and you bring it home and you pull it out and boy, the roots are just totally encircled the whole plant there.
Yep, you got it. For trees and shrubs, John, the more often than not, those container grown trees and shrubs are going to have circle roots just because they got nowhere else to go, so they circle around. And it might be a little difficult at the garden center to pull the pot off and look. I think you can almost assume that there's going to be a certain amount of circling roots.
Okay, so it's okay.
And so it's okay. A root system that didn't have to circle would probably be not much of a root system, in a pot, one way to look at it. And so a person is almost going to have to expect to deal with those circling roots when you get home. And when dealing with circling roots means you're going to cut through at least 4 parts of that or tease them apart, pull them apart so that they do not circle around, so that they are radiating outward or cut such that they do, so that they are no longer circling.
How about should we be looking at the bottom of the pot at all? Because if there's been times too when I bought something and I bring it home and I'm like, oh, there are roots coming out of the bottom of the pot. Is that a good sign? Is that a bad sign?
It's not really a bad sign if they're coming out the bottom, because they'll usually pull out of the holes when you go to pull it out of the pot or cut the pot away. But another thing to look for too is to make sure that the tree, especially, was not planted too deeply in the pot. And when I say too deeply, trees, as they enter the ground, have a flared out portion. The trunk flares out and it gets wider as it enters the soil. If you think of a tree in a yard or nature, the bottom of the tree where it meets the grass or the ground is wider out, the trunk flare. And occasionally, trees will get planted too deeply in the pot. And that flare at the bottom is buried way down in. And if it was planted at that same depth in your yard, 10 to 15 years later, we are seeing plants that die from being too deep. And so, from the onset, it's better look at that pot, look at the tree where it's in the pot, and make sure that you're already seeing that flare. If you don't see that flare, if it goes down in the pot straight as a telephone pole, when you get home, you're going to have to pull off the top of that soil and see where is that flared portion. And when you plant that tree, that is going to have to be visible above ground level so that you don't have future problems. And so good points, John.
We talked
trees.
a little bit about what to look for in pots. What should we look for on the tags?
Oh, the important thing on the tags, the all-important tag. That is one of the best inventions, was the plastic nursery tag. For perennials, of course, it gives the height, the width, the color, so you know how far apart to space them. On trees, the all-important thing on a fruit tree is what is the hardiness zone? And also any trees or shrubs, what is the hardiness zone of that trees, shrubs, perennials, to make sure it's going to fit to our zones 3 and 4. And the hardiness zones go upward. Zone 1 is way up by the Arctic Circle. So for our area, we need anything 4, 3, 2, 1 is going to be great. And so check tags for that. And also very important on shrubbery, the width and height, especially the width. Most of us have crowded shrubs way too close together or too close to the foundation. So make sure you look at that width. How wide is that shrub going to be? And then give it that circular footprint. So you give them enough space. And so a lot of good information on the tag.
You talked a little bit about zones. Certainly, like we've talked about this, that, you buy something, you think, well, it's good for our zone. The thing is that maybe the soil type's not right.
Oh, good point. Yeah. Does it have special soil needs? Some of the hydrangeas that get sold need acid soil. The best adapted type don't need for our area, but certain plants do. Perennials, oftentimes it will indicate on there prefer an organic type soil. Meaning we should amend it with lots of peat moss and compost and good things. For tomatoes and vegetables, the tag will indicate how many days on average to maturity. So that will, on tomatoes, gauge whether you're buying an early season tomato or a late one. It's nice to combine early, mid-season, late, but if you didn't look at the tag and you're only needing one tomato, and if you bought a late one, you might not have a tomato until September.
Well, and also that tomatoes particularly will say determinate or indeterminate.
Boy, you got it, John. Yes. And that makes a big difference too. Determinate versus indeterminate. If you don't have a very big space, you want a determinant. The indeterminate type, the way I remember that term is indeterminate grow indiscriminately. They just keep growing and vining, and they require quite a large space, or you can stake them up. But a determinate will be for a smaller space, a little more consolidated harvest. For containers, we want a determinate type. And I plant some of both, the determinate and indeterminate. I like both.
So yeah, lots of information's on the tags. Lots of things to look for there.
Another important thing on the tag is, container gardening is very important now. And vegetables, there are many container-friendly vegetables, and it will indicate that on the tag. For example, there are cucumbers that are container-friendly, and it'll indicate that. If you plant a regular vining cucumber in a pot, it will grow, but it'll try to take over everything else too. So again, container-friendly is a term to look for on the tag.
All right. Let's take another quick break. When we come back, more about what to do on your trip to the garden center to buy some of your new flowers and plants.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back. We're talking about maybe you're going to be taking your first trip to the garden center to buy yourself some new plants and flowers, the things to look for at the garden center, the things to do. As Don, as somebody who owned a garden center, what would so you're opening up your space, you want people to come in and shop. What things should customers do? And what are some do's and don'ts when it comes to just basically having someone in your house?
Yes, exactly. One of the biggest do's probably is patience. It's our growing season is kind of consolidated. The buying season, May is a busy month, so patience. Having understanding that there's lots of us that are in there buying things, so patience is always a good do. And another good do is that when you take that tag that we mentioned, especially in a potted plant, when you take that out to examine it, make sure that you get it back in that same pot.
Right.
Yeah, because speaking from experience, at the end of a busy day, we would sometimes see a pack of tomatoes with 2 tags in it and one a pack beside it that doesn't have a tag. Well, if they're different varieties, which of those tags is which? And you can't just guess, because if they're 2 different varieties, the next person maybe is wanting an early tomato and the tag got mixed in and it's a late tomato. So make sure that when we examine, and so now when I'm on the other side of the cash register and when I'm taking up tags to examine them, I'm very conscious of getting that back down in the same pack that I took it out of. And so that's very important. And to be gentle with the plants. Sometimes they're located in trays and it's not always easy to kind of get them apart, but be gentle with them so that the next customer that comes along will also be getting a good quality plant. The other thing that I used to get a kind of a kick out of is that occasionally people with a cell pack of plants, a cell pack of 4, they'd prefer one plant from another pack, so they'd pop one plant out of this one and kind of take one out of that pack and insert it into one, then try to, and so it's probably not a good idea to try to make up your own pack by because that kind of makes a mess of things. Your pack maybe came out fine because you specially selected, but the others get kind of messy then. And so, but if in a pack of plants, if it's a 4-pack and there's only 3 plants, maybe one died, that's kind of rare, but mention it up at the cash register if that's the one you want. But also I purposely look at a 4-pack to make sure I've got 4 good plants in. I don't try to mix and match by pulling some out, but make sure you're getting 4 or 6 if it's a 6-pack in there. And also watch kids. Garden centers are fun places for kids. The benches are about at eye height for a certain age of kids. And sometimes it's fun for kids to play hide and seek around the benches, but do keep an eye on them, because I'd hate to see a child kind of hit the corner of a garden bench, with their eye. And so,
and there can be a lot of puddles around.
Garden hoses sometimes
things.
Tripping,
so there's a lot of things that can be tripped over.
Yeah. Sometimes if an area was freshly watered, it might be a little slippery. And so, there's a lot of things that we need to kind of watch out on that. But generally, all our customers were good.
Yeah.
There were very few that tried to mix and match those cell packs, but occasionally we would see it. And of course, one of the things that I love to do, because I'm as thrifty as the next guy, I enjoy saving money at the garden center. And, it's not because I'm trying to get plants on the cheap, but if I can save a little money here, I can buy some more plants, of something else. So I don't think any garden centers object to you saving money, because in the long run, most of us that enjoy gardening are going to buy lots anyway. So, but a couple of ways that I look for saving money. Now, if we're potting up containers, oftentimes you can buy a single container plants, single potted plants, or you can buy packs, multi-packs. The multi-packs are usually less expensive. There may be slightly smaller plants, but they'll grow too. The individual potted plants are usually more expensive. Some things only come in those individual pots, so that's okay. But if they're multi-packs, they're usually cheaper. And also vegetables. A pack of 4, if you need at least 4 plants of tomatoes, a pack of 4 is going to be less expensive than an individual potted one, per plant. And perennials. Here's where I really enjoy saving some money. On a potted perennial, I enjoy looking to see if there are more than one plants coming out of the crown.
Okay.
So what I'm getting at is, many of those can be immediately divided when you get them home with a sharp knife. Cut right down through. Maybe you can get 3 divisions out of that one. Okay, it'll take a little bit of time for them to reach the same size as that one larger crown, but it's a good way. I oftentimes do that. Perennials is all about patience. They shouldn't be doing much blooming anyway. The first year, the strength should be going into the roots and the plant itself. And I prefer that they don't bloom that first year because that's taking a lot of energy. Perennials are an investment for future growing seasons. So when I get a perennial plant, I purposely look, for example, hosta. I look for a hosta that has kind of multiple little shoots coming out of the same crown, and they're quite easy to divide. And so in place of 1 hosta, I've just, for that same price, gotten 3 hosta. And then I can buy that plum tree that I want.
All right. Any other?
I should also mention on saving money in the garden center, trees and shrubs. They'll oftentimes come in different sizes, different size pots.
Yeah.
Like shrubs, you can buy oftentimes in a 1-gallon juniper versus a 5-gallon juniper. And of course, quite difference in cost too. They're going to end up to be the same thing. As long as the name is the same, they're going to grow into the same plant. There's maybe a year or 2 difference in growth. But to buy more plants and to ease your budget a little bit, starting with smaller plants. And sometimes, for example, in trees, large trees will suffer a shock and a setback. So sometimes a smaller tree planted will catch up and pass over a few years' time, catch up and pass that larger tree that kind of had to get reestablished because it's more of a shock planting a larger tree. So I'm never afraid to plant a smaller tree because just from experience, they'll oftentimes catch up and surpass a bigger one.
Thinking about that, one thing where I noticed that too is I really like ornamental grasses and and things like that, especially purple fountain grass. And there will be 3 or 4 different sizes, and with different sizes come different prices. The thing there, though, is that that's an annual. That's not going to be a perennial. So if you buy a smaller one, it's not going to get to as big as the big one. That's a good point. So think about like what you want. Think about the space that you have and what you want that plant to be. Because if it's an annual, you're only going to have it for 1 year. If you want something that's a big statement, you may have to spend that money for it.
Exactly. Yes. Yep. For things that you kind of want to enjoy during that season, like you mentioned, the annuals, then sometimes it pays just to treat yourself to something that's already nice. For example, hanging baskets.
Yeah.
An impatiens hanging basket or a petunia hanging basket, for example. You could buy a little pack of petunias and plant your petunias, or you could buy the nice one from the garden center that's already beautifully blooming. And sometimes it's a treat to start out with something that already looks really nice, especially when you're enjoying it for this season and it's not going to live over. So petunia baskets, the supertunias and all those, I can't wait to get to garden centers.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I hope you've got your list ready, and we all know that all of our lists are going to grow as we're there, but hopefully you have some fun time going out and
I might cut myself some slack. I might not stick to the list. I might do some impulse buying myself.
Splurge a little bit.
I will.
All right. Well, Don, thanks again for coming in. If people have questions for you about anything we've talked about on the show, or if they just have questions about their plants, now that they're seeing things coming up, plants and shrubs, what's the best way to reach you?
Yep, keep the emails coming, both on questions or successes that you've got. I always enjoy hearing about both. Send me an email, donald.kinsler, Kinzler, donald.kinsler@ndsu.edu.
All right. Well, happy shopping.
Yes. Thank you, John, and happy shopping to you as well.